Hi, it's Anna Mason. I recently painted this realistic French bulldog in watercolour, and in this video I'm going to show you how to paint it, which I hope will help you with your own pet portraits. Let's just say I know from experience that with animals it's usually easier to work from a photo, as getting them to pose for you is near on impossible. So here I worked from this photo. I began by making a really detailed outline drawing on some illustration board, making sure I was very light and pale with my pencil. Here we've made it darker so you can see it more clearly. I outlined the key features like the eyes, ears, nose and whiskers, but I also marked out with jaggedy pencil lines all of the main changes in tone or value in the fur. These are especially noticeable around the muzzle and nose area, and getting them in the right place will make a big difference to achieving the 3D shape. I always begin the painting by laying down a very light version of each colour I can see within each different area, making sure it's at least as light as the lightest bit of colour I can see in that area. We will darken up later, but it's so important with watercolour not to go too dark too soon. And it's all too easy to misjudge just how light or dark colours are until we have more of them painted. Even at this early stage, when I was painting fur, I made sure to apply the paint in short little lines with my brush to begin to build up a hairy visual texture. When I came to the eyes, I again started with the lightest colours, using a small brush to apply a pale grey wash to most areas within them, but leaving the highlights as the paper colour. While I was working on the eyes though, I decided to paint them to a near complete stage right away. I always find that brings an animal or bird painting to life. Plus, as the eyes are so important, I find that any pressure I feel to get the painting looking right subsides once the eyes are looking good. So once that was dry, the next stage with them was to paint the darkest parts of the eye, including the pupil, with a darker version of my black mix, but still not as dark as I would need to paint them. There are lots of subtle shapes and shades of grey and black in the eyes, which if I painted in the right places and in the right tone, will create a shiny curved look. So I want to make sure I don't take any of them too dark too quickly. I also painted in the brown shades to the iris with another pale mix. I then painted the other eye to this stage before going in with a darker, thicker black mix to darken the very darkest areas again, and then watering down again to slowly darken up the mid-tone shapes within the eye, and using my brush to add in plenty of the detailed little shapes of colour I could see within the eye. I worked on the other eye to a pretty complete state before returning to darken the darkest areas and mid-tones within the eye so that they looked in balance. With them looking back at me, I could work on the rest of the face, using a mid-tone mix of some of the black colour to focus on the darkest areas of fur and nose. I then painted the lightest tones to the tongue and the rest of the fur on the face. I took the mix a little darker on the darker parts of the body, as I didn't see as many flecks of white or very light grey there. With that layer dry, I concentrated on the darkest areas, but with a mix I knew wouldn't be quite as dark as it needed to be. Working slightly paler like this allows me to build in the furry texture via layers, and I do that by applying the paint in short little lines. Just having these shapes in place started to give the face form. I varied the consistency of my mix to match to the areas I was working on, but the focus was on the darker patches still. The dog was looking really disjointed at this stage, so I began to darken the midtones some more, using a larger brush and starting with the more brown colour in the ears. I then used a pale grey mix to work into all areas that were at least as dark as this mix, applying gently over the top of darker areas I'd just painted so as not to lift the short hair markings I'd made, and leaving gaps through to any areas that were lighter than this as I painted. This really brought the dog's fur together, even though at this stage it was still too light overall. Being too light at this stage is actually a good thing, as it means that there's more opportunity to add hairy fur texture as we layer up to darken. Next, I painted the tongue, before adding some more fur detail to the face. And then using a small brush to add the darker details to the nose, being careful here to leave lots of gaps through to the lighter colour underneath so as to create a wet look. The muzzle area required some shorter brush strokes to create the different visual texture there where the fur was a lot shorter. Next, I worked with a thicker, darker mix to apply another layer throughout, focusing on the darker areas, adding detail as I went. With all this darkening done, I could see I needed to darken the inside of the ears, so I did that with the brown mix, before using the dark paint and some smaller brush strokes to develop the visual texture to the fur there. I then got totally in the zone and spent a couple of hours adding furry texture with my small brush, all the way over the dog, always paying attention to the direction of the lines. Then I used the bigger brush and a pale wash to gently darken some of the lighter areas again. I could see these were now too pale because I'd been doing more darkening and the contrast levels were now looking too harsh. Next, I added even more details. There were just so many to capture when aiming for realism and painting at this scale. With most of the detail now added, it was time to paint the dark whiskers with my Treble Zero brush, before rinsing it off and using some white gouache to paint in the white whiskers. It would also have worked to have used some masking fluid at the beginning of the painting for these, applied with a pinpoint applicator. But on this occasion, my pinpoint applicator had broken, so I used gouache at the end, which works pretty well too. I did a final check for extra details to add, and the painting was finished. Full video classes showing how to paint the rest of this dog portrait are available now in my online school. If you've enjoyed this short video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and then hop on over to animasonart.com, where you can take a full-length video class for free and find a whole heap of resources to help you pick up your brush and paint the way you've always wanted to. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon to help you create more watercolours with WOW. Oh, you just won't sit still, will you, buddy? Will you sit still for a sausage?